Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Bonjour. So I welcome you all, the speakers, the participants, the organizing team, and everyone in this GEEP Africa webinar. In fact, it is this second GEEP Africa webinar. So let me first thank the staff of the North American Association for Environmental Education, NAAEE, namely Judy Bros, the Executive Director of the organization, Nina Hamilton, Andrew David, Carrie Albright, and all other supporting staff of the NAAEE. The GEEP Africa core team, especially Professor Mefelang Ketloi, for organizing this webinar. Next. I'm Ravi Bula from Mauritius, and I'm Associate Professor in Science Education Department, and also the Coordinator for Education for Sustainable Development at the Mauritius Institute of Education. And today I will be moderating this webinar. You will agree with me that humanity has been facing a series of interconnected challenges spanning environmental, social, economic, and health issues. These include the climate crisis, pollution, biodiversity loss and species extinction, deforestation, land degradation, and more frequent environmental disasters, growing inequality, setbacks in human rights, a lack of decent jobs, and the emergence of new zoonotic diseases. In today's webinar, we will look at the triple planetary crisis. And what does it mean? The triple planetary crisis refers to three interrelated problems: climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss. Each of these problems is a crisis with its own causes and effects, but all three converge and feed on each other. All three affect human rights and more intensely impact people in vulnerable conditions. Today's webinar will thus explore how these environmental issues can be tackled through environmental education and education for sustainable development. Next. Before we begin with the presentations, let me give you some information for you to participate actively in this webinar. We want to hear from you as well, and I will strongly encourage you to use the chat button. You can see the chat icon at the bottom to join conversation and ask questions as we go along the way. You can also click on the closed caption, the CC caption, and choose your preferred language to follow the webinar. I also want to inform the participant that this webinar is being recorded and will be shared at a later stage. Next. Before we actually dive into today's theme, let's take a moment to explore the what is Global Environmental Education Partnership and GEEP Africa. I would like to invite Nina Hamilton, Director of International and Leadership Programs, Global Environmental Education Partnership, GEEP, and NAE, to provide a brief overview of GEEP. Okay. And following her insights, I will then give you a quick information on GEEP Africa. So the floor is yours, Nina.
Thank you so much, Ravi. Thank you, everyone, for joining. We are thrilled to have you here with us today. I'm very excited to be here to share a little bit more about the Global Environmental Education Partnership. My name is Nina Hamilton. As Ravi said, I'm the Director of International and Leadership Programs at the North American Association for Environmental Education. We are the Secretariat of the Global Environmental Education Partnership, but we work closely with so many incredible partners. I want to give a shout out to US EPA and Ginger Potter, who is here with us today, for all of your support that has made GEEP possible, but also your strong support for GEEP Africa and this great team of GEEP Africa trying to get this new regional hub going. So with that, I want to share a little bit about the GEEP. So the GEEP was established in 2014 as a learning network. And our goal with the GEEP is to help build global capacity to strengthen environmental education and to ultimately collectively build a more equitable and sustainable future. And the GEEP is really the result of some incredible partnerships. EPA, as I mentioned, also our partners in Taiwan and other great partners around the world. We're really great. We're really grateful for your ongoing support and really continued collaboration as we continue to expand the GEEP in new ways. And of course, to the great team of GEEP Africa that has made this webinar possible. So GEEP is also the result of some incredible, passionate expert advisory group members that we are able to bring together pretty regularly to help drive the ideas behind the GEEP and give new input and new ideas into what we are doing with this learning network. And there we go. And so really with GEEP, we're creating this space for these leaders and other environmental education professionals to come together, think creatively about how we can have an even greater impact in the field as our priorities are changing each year, the world around us is changing, so that we really pride ourselves on creating that space for exploring those new ideas. We also, collaborating across borders is really key to our approach. We work with our network of organizations, of government partners, all kinds of stakeholders to help develop and share effective practice in environmental education. We will share our website that has a lot of great resources that we hope you might find helpful as you develop your own practice and your organization's practice in environmental education. And again, ultimately, this goal is to help spark collaboration and partnerships across our network. And we ourselves are working with a lot of great organizations and networks to make this work possible. Not only our founding partners, but each year we are expanding our reach thanks to the great communities of our other partners around the world. And with that, we are really a network of networks. We do this through our partnerships, and we really prioritize collaborating closely with other networks that have maybe different regional focuses or even different topical focuses, but we all share that common vision of a more just and sustainable future. And we really see that environmental education is key to helping us address or achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And you will see this woven throughout the resources that we have on our website. You will see this throughout the webinars that we host, and I think throughout this webinar today. And that EE is really important for connecting all of these different Sustainable Development Goals and showing how they are interconnected. So I really encourage you to take a look at our website to learn more. There's a lot of great resources on effective practice in environmental education, but also we have a great resource for exploring what environmental education looks like in countries around the world in our country profiles. And we will actually be updating our website pretty soon, so keep a lookout for that the new look and new and improved resources in the near future. And I think with that, I'm going to turn it back to Ravi, but just want to thank you all again for being here. Thank you, Ravi, and the whole team, all the speakers at GEEP Africa for putting this webinar on.
Thank you. Thank you, Nina. So now I'm going to give a quick overview on GEEP Africa. As you have uh, learned from Nina, GEEP Africa is a regional hub under the Global Environmental Education Partnership, focus on advancing environmental education across the African continent. You can see it focuses on North Africa, South Africa, East, West Africa, and also Central Africa. Next. Next. Nina, can you move? Yeah. Now, what is the vision of GEEP Africa? It is for a just and sustainable Africa through meaningful thought leadership and lifelong learning to maximize African potential. And what is the mission? It is to enable and strengthen a dynamic regional sustainability movement that is transformational, that is collaborative, and grassroots oriented. It is not only top, it is also bottom up, top to bottom and bottom to top approach using multi-sectoral networks, social inclusion in indigenous knowledge to advance environmental education for a just and sustainable Africa. So you see the mission is aligned with the vision of the GEEP Africa. Next. And to achieve its mission, GEEP Africa will strive to, firstly, to build capacity, to advance policy and practice, to foster strategic partnerships. It's extremely important. We, as Global GEEP is doing, we also want to have this kind of partnership and have EEE networks in African continent. We want to become connected. And then also we want to promote and encourage innovation. This is very important in EE and ESD throughout Africa at multiple scales. And we want also to act as a source for sharing. It has to be seen that it is there to provide all the resources and connecting everybody to provide opportunities for learning. Next. Now, we have also a set of objectives, 5 main objectives to achieve this GEEP Africa goals. Firstly, we want to promote high quality EESD programs and strategies. We want to demonstrate the value and impact of how this education helps to address key social and environmental issues such as climate change, biodiversity loss and pollution, and others. We want to create a network of continental leaders because we think if we have the right person in the right place, and these people can be the best ambassador to make change down the line. We want to also create a forum for innovative, cutting-edge thinking. And for this, we need people, we need experts, we need professors, and we want to create that kind of dialogue that will help to move Africa forward. And for this to happen, GEEP Africa is going to be abreast with the national, with the regional and national kind of agenda. Like firstly, the Africa Agenda 2063, Africa's climate change and resilient development strategies, with all the continental strategies. It has to be aligned. So we'll be working with the different regions of Africa and move forward together. Next. And so far, we had first consultative meeting on 20th February, where we invited many persons from different regions. We had a very interesting, very productive meeting, and we had others in the East Africa. Then we had in the North, and we are still having other meetings. And it's good to note that last year we had a very productive GEEP Africa. It was the first webinar, very successful, and that has really given us another kind of encouragement to come up with other set of webinar. And today is the second webinar, and I think this will be also very fruitful and productive, and will be very helpful for people from the African continent and from the globe. Thank you. Can we move to the next one? Now, as you can see from this slide, you see, we have 3 young and very dynamic panel speakers. They are innovative practitioners of environmental organizations, which are using environmental education and ESD to drive positive, sustainable change in their respective countries. They will share their experiences and insights in today's webinar. They are as follows: Basiru Koroma, who is the executive president and founder of GEEP Africa, beautiful from Sierra Leone. Then we will have Joy Haley Muntali she is the executive director of Green Girls Platform. She's from Malawi. Then we will have Tusabe Richard, founder and executive director of Global Initiative for Young Environmental Stewards. Okay. Can we move to the next slide? Thank you. And actually, he is from Uganda. I forgot to tell you. And next thing that I want to tell you is this webinar will be actually focusing on three main topics. Okay. The first one will be the role of children and youth engagement in addressing vulnerabilities and building resilience in changing climate. Second one will focus on integrating indigenous knowledge and place-based learning in environmental education for children and youth to address the triple planetary crisis. And third one will be challenges and opportunities for environmental education and the role of the youth people addressing the triple planetary crisis issues in East Africa. We will be giving each speaker, we will at least, after each presentation, we will give at least some time to attend to one question. But at the end of all the sessions, all the presentation, we will take all the questions. And so there will be a special QA, question and answer session at the end of the presentations. So with this, we move to the first speaker. And I now present Mr. Basiru Koroma, who is from Sierra Leone. Basiru Koroma has over 12 years of experience in conservation leadership, natural resource management, ecotourism, climate justice activism, children and youth advocacy, and environmental health, water, sanitation, and waste management. Currently, Basiru is an NDC partnership in-country facilitator for Sierra Leone, product planning and development officer at the National Tourist Board Sierra Leone, and is also the executive president and founder GEEP Africa Beautiful. Thank you. So the floor is yours now, Basiru.
Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. And I want to say hello. I bring you greetings from Freetown, Sierra Leone. And I would like to welcome you all to this wonderful webinar. My role here too is to present on the role of children and youth's engagement in addressing vulnerabilities and building resilience in changing climates. I'm going to use Sierra Leone as a case study in this presentation. So next slide, please. So the presentation outline is like, I'll take you through the breathtaking scenes of Freetown, Sierra Leone, and the impact of climate change on youths and children in Freetown, and how we are strengthening children and youth resilience to climate change, and also how we are empowering children and youth through engagement and education, and also a climate change agenda for youth and children. Next slide, please. So I would like to start by introducing you to a wonderful city, Freetown, the capital city of Sierra Leone. Freetown combines natural beauty, rich cultural heritage, and warm hospitality, with state mountains, lush rainforests, breathtaking, pristine beaches, and a unique and long-standing culture. Freetown has great history and warm hospitality. Freetown is a perfect coastal gem to explore. So you have to start planning your Freetown adventure from today. Get ready to discover the beauty of Freetown and create an experience that will stay with you forever. Freetown is extremely beautiful. Next slide, please. However, Freetown is one of the cities in Africa that is on the front line of a climate crisis. It is clearly evidence in Freetown that climate change is changing weather patterns, increasing the frequencies and intensities of extreme weather events. Unfortunately, those in the poorest communities like children and youth are disproportionately affected. On the 14th of August 2017, the citizens of Freetown experienced the impact of a devastating landslide that left over 1,000 people dead or missing, while also leaving 11,000 people displaced and hopeless. Prior to this landslide, Freetown experienced 3 days of intense and heavy rainfall, which caused part of Sugarloaf Mountain, one of the highest peaks, to collapse. The scale of the damage was unprecedented, with people and homes buried alive under mud, rock and rubble, and flooding swept away homes and properties. It caused millions of dollars of destruction and damage to buildings, infrastructure. This was considered one of the Africa's deadliest mudslides in decades. Children and youth were left homeless, vulnerable, and terrified. The cause of this mudslide was attributed to rapid urbanization, deforestation, and was exacerbated by climate change impacts. The World Bank estimated that the economic loss of this mudslide was approximately 31.65 million US dollar. So you can see photos here before the mudslide and when the mudslide happened, and also what happened with the flash flood. This was a national catastrophe. It was really huge. It is exactly 7 years away from today. Next slide, please. And it was during that mudslide that I started my advocacy, because seeing the constraints that people were going through, the challenges, more especially how vulnerable, how disproportionately it affected children and youths, because they were more vulnerable. And moreover, climate change risks in Sierra Leone involve more of like water resource, increase in demand for water. There was a serious problem with water, and increased variability of temperature and precipitation, increase in vector waterborne diseases, increased riverine, coastal, and urban flooding. So all of these challenges, it impacted children and youth more because they are the most vulnerable in society. So I was leading a youth group that volunteers to actually participate in helping to save life and properties. Next slide, please. So after the mudslide, we started investigating what is really the cause of this problem and how can we deal with it. I realized that there was a gap between knowledge and understanding of children and youth. Most of our people never know what was the problem. So I started engaging children and youth, engaging them through adaptation, disaster risk reduction intervention in communities. We started building their resilience through education, because these are communities that are highly vulnerable, exposed. And so we started building resilience by building things we call resilience hub. In the face of unavoidable impacts of this next generation, children and youth-centered adaptation is necessary. So therefore, we focus on such needs of children and youth in the face of climate change. Because most of the time, children and youth are viewed as passive victims of climate change, but they are powerful agents of change. So we want to use children and youth as a powerful agents of change so that we can use them to change the narrative. Next slide, please. So through this advocacy, I have been able to participate in several programs, like attend the UN COP26 and COP27, and I have attended a lot of international climate and environmental conferences. So I have to borrow initiatives from international perspective and bring them to localize them here in Sierra Leone. I have to bring relevant strategies and activities to promote in different communities. So I have to promote knowledge, skills, attitude, and value necessary to shape a sustainable future. Promote learning about the causes and effects of climate change as well as possible responses, enhance resilience, encourage changes in behavior, and promote critical thinking among children. Promote climate resilience development and reduce vulnerability of communities. Ensuring that climate change is integrated in education legislations, policies, and sector plans and budgets. I have engaged schools and training institutions, teachers, so that they will be aware and how to take measures to prevent such subsequent occurrence. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So this is one of my intervention where I bring together about 100 young children and youths so that I taught them about what are the causes, the effects, and adaptive mechanism to the impact of climate change. Currently, I have built a center which I call International Climate Science Center in both districts, where I want the center to be like a resilience hub, which will compile resources, information that will, will be useful to communities in the face of this crisis so that we can help. But we are also looking for networks, collaboration opportunities so that we can help these vulnerable youths and children so that we can help in building their adaptive capacity to the impacts of climate change because most of them are so vulnerable that they don't even know what is happening, and we are like living on the crisis on the front line of a climate change crisis. Next slide. Next slide, please. So I want to stop here and thank you very much for listening to this presentation. And I hope you get everything well. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ashiru, for your very insightful presentation. And must congratulate you because I see the kind of work you have done following the incidents in your country and the set of initiatives that you have taken at your level to make things happen. That's really great. We have to learn from you. Uh, I don't know. I'm just asking if you have any questions from the floor. If I have one question before I move to the second present speaker. Ambassador, you in one of your slides, you have mentioned that you have mentioned about the different climate change agenda, and you said scaling up the proven approaches to address the changing needs of children. Could you please elaborate on this? What do you mean by this?
So, as we all know, there are needs of children and youth that is different from the needs of adults in disaster, in catastrophic events. So this need approach is what I mean by that, by scaling them up so that we can have an agenda that will look specifically to the needs of children. For example, in my presentation, you hear me mention water scarcity, health issues. You hear me mention situation of education. Sometimes children have to drop out because of these catastrophes, because of these challenges like flooding. So we have to attend to these needs. We have to create an agenda, a resilience hub, so that we can react to the mental health of these children because the mental health has going to be affected. They are not used to it. These are some of the agendas we are looking at. We have to collaborate with international youth organizations like Yongu because there are lots of information in Yongu that we can replicate here in Sierra Leone. These are the agendas we are looking at to scale up to connect our young people to networks internationally so that they can be able to build their capacity to adapt to the impacts of climate change.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Basiru. Very wonderful answer. Thank you.
You're
So
welcome.
I will now connect to the second speaker. And the second speaker is Joy Haley Muntali. So indigenous knowledge has been extensively studied and used to promote environmental education in both developed and developing countries. And if I take IK, is one of the topic that is extensively studied in Africa. Okay, so I have now the pleasure to invite Joy Hele Mentali for her presentation. She will explain her indigenous knowledge and place-based learning in environmental education, or how this is being used to address a triple planetary crisis to children and youth. But before she embark on her presentation, I would like to introduce her. She is a young youth activist and passionate environmental educator, the founder and current executive director of Green Girls Platform. She leads a female-driven initiative committed to addressing the unique challenges girls and women face due to climate change in Malawi. Joy is deeply passionate about voluntary work and working with children and youth to ensure that their rights are fully realized. Her dedication to improving the lives of girls and young women in Malawi through environmental education is a driving force behind her work. So that is Joy. We are very happy or very excited to hear from you now. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ravi. And thank you for having me. Next slide, Dina.
Thank you.
All right. So as Ravi said, I'm Joy Haley Muntali, and I am the founder of Green Girls Platform from Malawi. Next slide, Nina. And I'll be presenting on how we can integrate indigenous knowledge and place-based learning in environmental education for children and youth as a solution to the triple planetary crisis. Next slide. So this is just the lineup of how I'll take you through my presentation and how we'll talk about how we can integrate IK and place-based learning and environmental education. Next. Next slide. Okay, well, I'll give a brief background about Green Girls. So Green Girls Platform, as stated in the name, is a platform for girls, and we all come together to talk about the impacts of climate change in Malawi and how girls and young women are adapting, but also how youth in general are adapting to climate change and coming up with solutions that work in our own context. So we're a young women-led organization and specifically set up to address the unique challenges that girls and young women face due to climate change in Malawi. And what we do is to provide safe spaces where girls and women can learn about climate change, share ideas and solutions, and implement climate resilient solutions that are working in our context in Malawi. Next slide. All right, so just to give a brief of a context, what we're trying to do with environmental education is to address the impacts of climate change on children and young people in Malawi and how the impacts of climate change are affecting them, to inspire hope, but to also help them to share solutions and work collectively. And we're trying to break down the complex issues of climate change. So explaining the triple planetary crisis to a child between the ages of 5 to 10 is really frustrating. But we try to break it down so that a child can understand clearly what we're trying to mean when we say a triple planetary crisis and where it came from and how it is affecting people in Malawi. And so we try to break the complex issues and make them really simple for children and youth to understand. And at the same time, we're breaking down the social and digital divide that is there in climate action in Malawi, because we have urban youth as well as rural youth. And we're trying to bring them together to talk about climate change in a way that doesn't make them feel like we are divided and we're dealing with this separately, but trying to bring them together to share knowledge and have collective solutions to climate change. And all in all, what we're trying to do is to inspire young people to take climate action. Next slide, Nina. So what do I mean when I say place-based learning? So when we were starting with our environmental education work, we were doing it really informally because trying to get to schools or communities was a bit hard for young people, especially young women. And so we're doing it informally where we just brought the people that we know together to talk about what climate change is and how they can adapt to climate change. And what we found was that there was no connection between children and young people to the environment and to understand really what climate change is. And as part of our work now is trying to make sure that we incorporate place-based learning in everything that we do, because you cannot care about something you don't know. That's what we try to motivate them, that if you don't know what a tree looks like, you cannot really care about it because it's not part of what you're doing. But then if we take the kids to a forest and they actually see the trees and we say this tree is really extinct and we need to take care of it, they guard it with their lives. And so what we started doing is to take children outside, to take them somewhere where they learn about the environment in a space that they connect to it and they feel a particular belonging to that community and to that environment. And as you can see in the far right, we have kids doing a hiking exercise. This was really inspired by them. They wanted to hike one of the mountains in one of the areas that we teach. And then down there, they're in a forest, and we took them to that forest because we're trying to talk about the effects of thin plastics on natural forests in Malawi, where plastics are dumped in the forest and nobody is doing anything about it. So we took them there to learn about the effects of thin plastics on forest and how the impact of forest was really high. The impact of thin plastics on forest was high. And we took them there and we said, well, look at all these thin plastics. And they decided to start picking up the waste. So that is why we think place-based learning is really important, and it really brings that connection and sense of belonging. Next slide, Nina. Right, and then you might wonder why indigenous knowledge. This is, as Ravi said, something that has been extensively studied in Africa and something that people are really trying to understand how indigenous knowledge works. And I'll talk from my experience in Malawi, where it's just the wisdom that people have and practices that they have developed over a long period of time. And this is passed on down from generations to generations, and it is central in the daily lives of many African communities, and especially for Malawi. And I'll talk about why we started incorporating indigenous knowledge in the next slide. Next, Nina. All right, so in our work at Green Growth, we're working in 4 regions in Malawi, which is the northern region, the central region, the eastern region, as well as the southern region. And as you can see, that is really a diverse range of areas, and they also have different cultures and different indigenous people. And so where there is the green, that's where we're working. And that's the far top, that's the northern region. And in that region, the people there speak Tumbuka language and they're Otumbuka, and they believe in having lots of trees and having lots of, they believe that having biodiversity and having livestock is a sign of wealth. And when we started working there, we were encouraging them to plant trees, to take care of the environment. And one of the women approached us and said, that is already something that we do. That is already something that is embedded in our culture. You can't encourage us to keep doing something that we already know, already practice in our culture. The only difference is that you think you know what we are not doing, but we actually know what we're doing. And so after that, we decided that before we go into a community, we have to talk to the people that have been living in that community, the people that understand that community. And what ended up happening is that we now complement our work with the knowledge that is already in that community. And it's easier when you adopt their language, you adopt their culture. Now you have like a common ground where you understand each other, and it's easier to provide education that is tailored to that community because you are connected. Next slide. All right, so why do we integrate the two? It is because place-based learning makes things matter. It brings in that connection and it makes people understand their local context and communities, especially for children and young people. And indigenous knowledge brings in sustainability. And bringing these two together can really address the triple planetary crisis. Because if people care about an environment, they cannot pollute it. And we're dealing with pollution. If we bring the two together and we have sustainability, then we will not have biodiversity loss. And at the same time, if we integrate the two, then they can be able to reduce the effects of climate change and mitigate climate change. Next slide. So how do we do it with green growers? The first thing that we do is to partner with the local communities, as I already said, because they have more knowledge than we do, and it's easier to work with them if we understand them. And they can also tell us all the places that are really facing the impacts of climate change and where we have to go with our work. And the second thing that we do is to have storytelling sessions, which is like a tradition in Malawi. Grandmothers sit around the fire and tell stories to their grandchildren. And at the same time, we adopt that where we take people from the older community to talk about how the environment was looking like in the past, what is happening in the present, and how can we work collectively to ensure that we are conserving the environment. Another thing that we do is to create safe spaces for intergenerational knowledge sharing, spaces that don't make young people feel like they can't talk, but also the ones that make older people humble enough to learn from the current generation. And the other thing that we do is to provide experiential learning where young people and children are learning hands-on and they understand things when they are in the environment and learning from everything. Next slide. So, so far, these are the things that we have learned. First thing is that providing Indigenous knowledge and place-based learning provides a holistic learning where young people, especially children, get to understand their culture, they get to understand the environment, and then they sit down and decide the solutions. Next. The next thing is that it builds climate resilience. When you bring people together and they're talking, they come up with collective actions that work in their context and builds their resilience. Next, it also encourages critical thinking and problem solving. And this is especially for place-based learning, where they understand their challenges, they understand the issues that they're facing, and they can sit down and come up with solutions that are analytical, but also solutions that are informed by experiences. And that encourages them to critically think and come up with resilient solutions that will work in their context. Next. It also encourages collective climate action, because if you have spaces that are bringing in everyone and you're adopting their language and talking with them in a sense that you understand what they are facing and also providing the empathy to come together and learn from each other, then we have collective climate action. Next. It also enhances cultural relevance and identity. And in Malawi, that is something that is really important for children and young people, where we are constantly facing the issue of trying to stick with our identity and understand ourselves. So providing place-based learning and Indigenous knowledge helps them to understand their cultures, but also understand why people do the things that the way that they do, and it helps in also connecting them with the community. Next. And the other thing is that it provides inclusive learning opportunities. So whenever we do place-based learning, anyone is in that environment, they feel what is happening, they can see and they can hear things. And we make sure that we're trying to bring them together in a way that doesn't make anyone feel excluded, but also in a language that they can all understand and work together to ensure that they are learning, they're getting the best from the education that we're providing. And next. And the last thing, which is the most important thing, it ensures sustainability, because once knowledge is passed on, we are sure that the next person will pass it on to the next generation as well. So in the next slide, this is just some of the examples of the work that we've been doing with our ensuring place-based learning as well as Indigenous knowledge. And this is one of the best things that I have seen happening. In the first picture, the kids that are making the reusable bags, which for the paper bags, they made them on their own because they had seen how they had so much plastic waste in the forest and they wanted to do something differently. And next is when we're doing a lesson on clean water and how it's important for young people, and they were looking at the clean water and comparing it to water from a borehole. And then the other one is women and girls in one garden teaching each other how they do their sustainable farming practices and understanding how things work and how they can keep tree seedlings for different environmental work. Next slide. And this is also an interesting group that we met. So the women started their business in 1981, where they have over 4,000 tree seedlings, and they have been doing this business for over 30 years. And so now they're training girls and young women to also take over the business. If you can see in the picture, you can see that there are people from different age ranges, and they brought each other together to keep passing on the knowledge and keep the tree seedlings. And they have separate tree seedlings that they hold as community tree seedlings that they actually have rules that these ones do not have to go extinct, and the next generation carries it on like that. Next slide. And this is one of our intergenerational spaces where we go to the place that they want to talk about and express how it has been, the way it used to look like in the years before, how it's looking like now, and then collectively come up with things that they feel could be the solutions to the biodiversity loss or the air pollution or anything that they feel is missing or something that wasn't in existence. And next slide. And this is one of the best initiatives that we pioneered. This picture was taken in 2021, and it was an initiative that was driven by the girls. They wanted to plant trees around their community because they thought that there was high deforestation in the area, and they wanted to change that. And so we provided the tree seedlings, and the Ministry of Forestry said they wanted a certain type of tree seedlings because it was the one that is sustainable in that community. And the chief said no and chose another group of tree seedlings. And so in the end, they planted the tree seedlings, and we have seen 80% growth rate. And this initiative was done by both women, girls, as well as the children. So all of this shows us how it's important to actually bring people together, provide education that is in the context of their the places that they're in, but also connect them to their culture and enhance their the relevance of the education that we're providing. So the next slide is just me saying thank you. And yes, thank you so much, Ravi. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Joy. It was really very interesting. You have given a very clear picture of how indigenous knowledge and the place-based learning can help enhance environmental education and address climate change. Really excellent. And I was also surprised to see how you're connecting whatever you're doing to the culture. Different, when you look at environment is not only the biophysical dimension, but how you're connecting the social dimension, the economic dimension, the cultural dimension. It's very well kind of linked. Very good, fantastic. Thank you very much for this very enriching presentation. I'm going to take only one question before I move to the next one. Tell me, what's the biggest challenge you have been facing when you're implementing this project, and what is most hopeful in the coming years or coming months?
Thank you so much, Bashir. That's a hard question because we have so many challenges. But I think one of the challenges that we have is that we're constantly fighting a battle. And that's because whenever we teach a community something, or whenever we're training with children and youth, and then we have a disaster, or we have, I'll give an example of last year when we went to a community and they had a green garden and everything was going on so well. And then we had Cyclone Freddy and everything was washed away. So it is really hard to inspire hope and to get them to take over the initiative again after a climate crisis or a disaster happens. So I could say that is one of the worst challenges that we have been facing, like how to inspire hope after a disaster or a crisis happens and how to bring people back together. My hope is that, well, we have so many people now that are paying attention, so many policies that are being put in place, and there's a global movement and webinars like this that bring people together to talk about climate crisis and how we can address the triple planetary crisis. And my hope is that we'll all be humans and really deal with climate change so that we don't have to face the constant losses of hope, especially in Malawi.
Good. Thank you. Thank you very much. So thank you very much, Joy. Let's move to the third and the final presenter. And actually, he will explain about some challenges and opportunities for environmental education and the role of youth people in addressing the triple planetary crisis issues in East Africa. Before Richard actually embarks on his presentation, I would like to present him. Richard Tusape is a founder and executive director of Global Initiative for Young Environmental Stewards Uganda. He is a CE Change Fellow, a World Food Forum Youth Representative for Uganda, a COP28 Youth Delegate. He's currently pursuing an MSc in Climate Change and Development at Makerere University. His dedication to environmental stewardship is not only theoretical, but also deeply rooted in practical initiatives. So I will now leave the floor to Richard to give his presentation. I know we are going to learn a lot from him. So please go ahead, Richard.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much, Ravi, for that wonderful introduction. I feel like one of these days, it's very troubling that in environment education, we don't have much of celebritism, but these kind of introductions of, the different profiles here really gives you an energetic feeling, and you feel like, wow, this is a very safe and wonderful place to be. So I'm so much honored to be part of this webinar, and many thanks to Ravi, Nina, who gave a wonderful preamble about GEEP, and especially GEEP Africa. I remember some 1.5 years ago, I attended one of the webinars or workshops of GEEP, and I was in my feedback, I was contemplating, are we able to have a platform in Africa where we are talking about global environment educational issues? And now I'm so happy to be finally part of the conversations with which are being organized by GEEP and representing Uganda right now. Many thanks to my fellow panelists, Bashir and Joy. For Joy, I just have one question, maybe something that we can think of as we go ahead. Indigenous knowledge is really a very, very important tool of understanding and passing on environmental education. But the challenge we have, I think, especially in Africa, is the preservation of indigenous knowledge. How best are we able to preserve it so that we, the current generation and the future generations, can really be tapping from it to reap the best out of it? Yeah. So, well, my name is Richard Tusabe, as I've been introduced. I will not introduce myself again, but my presentation will be looking at the challenges and opportunities of environmental education and what we think is the role of the young people. We can go to the next slide, please. Yes, those who are familiar with Uganda, you could be knowing Lake Victoria, and I think even at a global level, we know Lake Victoria, I think, as the second largest lake in the world, but I think in Africa is the largest lake. This is Lake Victoria, and that's the docking place or the pier for one of the ferries connecting the mainland to Kalangala Islands, or the Sese Islands in Kalangala district. And this is a clear example of the triple planetary crisis, especially when we speak in terms of climate change, because I feel like I wanted to re-echo more of the crisis. And this time around, I'll be looking at basically two things: the rising levels of, our different water systems. And as we are seeing the pier there, or the docking point, it's almost falling in, or it's almost disappearing. It's causing lots of accidents. It's causing inconveniences when it comes to ferries docking on that docking point. And this is all happening because of, climate change. because of the melting of the glaciers, because of, you know, the melting of the mountain snows on our Renzori mountain in Uganda here. And all that, when it happens, all the water gets drawn back into the lake, which gets to increase its water levels and affecting infrastructure there, affecting transport system, affecting the fishing. All that place used to be a very clear and good place for accessibility before the water levels increased to that extent. And we could easily just go into the lake, especially near the lake shores when we were young, because for your information, I'm born from that island. And when we were young, we could just enter into the lake and pick some fish, which was very easy. But these days, because the water has increased, it's no longer possible. We have lots of accidents on the lake. We have lots of inconveniences in the transport system, which is really alarming. And that is really brings us to the understanding that climate change as one of the triple planetary crises is within us. If we have been all watching the news, it's very hard now to put on your TV, to go on the internet, maybe like in 3 or 4 days or 2 days in a week, and you don't see any climate related kind of disaster. We just watched from 2 months back, I think that was around May, when our friends from Kenya, they received a very, very terrible flooding, which almost costed lots and lots of lives. I think close to 300 people died. People's homes were swept away. The roads were being blocked. When we looked at the animals, they were dying. People's crops were being swept away. So it is very serious, and it is here with us. And in our next slide, I want to introduce you to the conversations, especially in Uganda here, which caught the charts on social media, where everyone was creating, you know, kind of alarm. Everyone was touched by the heat waves, by the too much heat in the month of March and April. And for our information here, in Uganda, we have 2 rainfall seasons. The first one in the year, the first one starts from March, then it goes to April up to May. Then from June, July, and August, we are expecting a little bit of a dry season. Then from there, when we go to September, October, November, there up to December, we are expecting a rain season. But it is surprising these days that instead of getting the rainfall that we are expecting, we either get the heat. So in the next slide, this video here is talking about the memes. It is showing the memes where Ugandans were wondering and were highly touched by the lot of heat. And some of them had that to say. Yes, thank you very much, Nina. Yes, thank you very much, Nina. The reason of showing you that was indeed to let us be aware that the communities, the people out there, everywhere, people are witnessing this triple planetary crisis, this climate change issues. And it is no longer news. It is no longer something that people do not know. And I think this is how much environment education has gone far to really let everybody get to know and get to be part of the conversations which are speaking in terms of climate change. So in this next slide, we are talking about the role of environmental education, especially in bringing about environmental management practices and raising that kind of consciousness within us to be responsible and aware that the environmental issues are here, and this is how best we can tackle them. And the environmental education per se, it's a process that we can say that helps us to develop knowledge. Some of us, we've seen the previous panelists who are in various schools, building knowledge into the learners about what environmental crises are happening, what is climate change per se, what causes climate change, and how best can we be able to tackle the climate change issues. And environment education also goes ahead to equip people with various skills. We are seeing in this picture that regardless of the kind of work we do under environment education, we are able to give the learners a little bit of the skills and tools to be able to create change in their communities by putting up initiatives and interventions that can solve environmental challenges, but at the same time also help to solve the humanitarian challenges. Because if, for example, learners in schools like this get the skills of how to construct tree nursery beds and plant trees, the same skills can be transferred or taken back home, and they can start the same nursery beds, and they are able to sell the nursery beds, rather seedlings from the nursery beds, and they get a little bit of money or some income, and they are able to survive. We are witnessing that in the schools, we are witnessing that in the communities where we are. But also environmental education helps to develop attitudes. Right now we are in one of the regions of the country, it's called Teso region, where we implement some of our projects. And we had a conversation when we were coming with the team in the car. We are looking at some people on the road who, after maybe drinking water from a plastic bottle, somebody just throws the water bottle on the road. And some of my colleagues were really, they look at that as something that is really alarming. And one of our colleagues were like, these days, ever since I started to do work in environmental education, my attitudes really changed. If I've eaten maybe some snack from maybe a plastic, a polythene bag, I'm obliged to pick that polythene bag, keep it in my pocket until when I reach a point where I can ably dispose it without affecting the environment or just littering it anywhere. So our attitudes really change towards the environment. We've seen the pictures from Joy's work. We see that if the kids are brought to, they are introduced to nature-based kind of learning, you grow up when you have respect and you have value and you know the values and the kind of contributions and the reasons why you should really preserve nature, preserve the trees, respect the animals, respect each other. So I think environmental education helps us to develop those 4 core attributes: knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values. Next slide. Yes, as Ravi was introducing the concept, the topic of the day today, we talked about environmental education as a foundation for sustainability. That picture there shows one of the work that is done in Uganda under a component called Environment Parliament. This environmental education really empowers, especially the young people, to grow up with a great sense of responsibility, to speak even for themselves when it comes to their climate and environmental rights. So, and also develop some problem-solving skills and critical thinking. Next slide. Yes, these three components of the triple planetary crisis have been spoken much about, but environment education really helps and empowers us when we look at climate change in living lifestyles that really do not lead to the creation or to the increment of, carbon emissions. Our lifestyle can be really well guided to live lifestyles which do not really to, high carbon emissions, which we know that climate change is really vested on carbon emissions, also helping us to come up with strategies that can really help us adapt to the climate change issues. Yeah, when we look at the biodiversity loss, this really helps us to, do ecosystem restoration, sustainable resource management, because you're now aware of how best you yourself as a human being, you can really interact with nature and the rest of what is in the environment. When it comes to pollution, it tells us, especially in our behaviors, how can we really behave in manners that really do not lead to generation of a lot of waste per se, looking at the 4 Rs, where we have waste reduction, waste reuse, waste recovery, and recycling of waste. Uganda has just witnessed a very serious disaster where our landfill has just sunk in and it has killed lots of people, damaged people's houses, and it has been really very, very alarming. It is unfortunate that I also lost an Ogi from that landfill when it collapsed in. But environment education really helps us, gives us the empowerment and the understanding of how best we can live a waste-free kind of lifestyle. Next slide. Yes, but it shouldn't go without saying that environment education, especially in Africa, is facing serious challenges. You and I will agree that our kind of education system is still wanting. We still have poverty and the mindset. Somebody, instead of concentrating on tree planting, somebody will be like, no, I planted a tree today. It's going to take the next 15 years or 20 years. Will I be alive to enjoy the benefits? So the mindset is still needing to be worked upon, but also the unsupportive government policies or the law enforcement is still also a serious challenge. Right now, we are struggling as a country to have environment education and climate change education to be mainstreamed into the education curriculum, which is still very hard because the process to change the education curriculum takes a long time, and not everyone can really be supportive on that. Some policies are there, but their enforcement is also still lacking, being affected by corruption, being affected by lack of funding to implement the policies and stuff like that. Next slide. Yes, but we still, not all is lost. We still have chances of promoting or scaling up environmental education in Africa if we can do more partnerships with the governments, NGOs, and the private sector. And this webinar here is a very good eye-opener because I see lots of Ugandans in attendance. I see the government representatives in attendance. And if we start slowly like this, there's a lot that we can learn from each other, and there's a lot of opportunities that we can tap into that can even help to address point number 2 of use of technology to enhance environmental education. People are using the internet, people are using social media, people are coming up with innovative ideas, all courtesy of environmental education. But also if we increase on investment, close to, when we look at investments in environmental projects, especially in Africa, while the African Development Bank itself has invested close to $1.2 billion US dollars, which we think it has done wonderful work, but we still really need more to make sure that interventions of this sort can be really scaled up. Next slide.
Richie, I'm gonna suggest that maybe we can share the video around in the email because we're out of time. Fortunately, we want to maybe give you a chance to answer one question. I don't know if we still have time, but if that's okay, we can share the video around. And if you had any final things that you wanted to share.
Yeah, I think it's okay if the video can be shared in the results of this webinar. That would be fine. But if anyone has maybe a question or something to share, be happy to hear from them.
Thank you, Richard. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, Ravi, you're back on mute. If you can unmute.
Can't hear you.
Okay.
There you
Okay,
go.
so thank you very much, Richard, for your very exciting presentation. It was really good, and you gave a very good picture of what is happening in Uganda. And I think we got the message what is happening, and you also kind of give a very elaborated information on the opportunities and challenges with respect to climate change. Because we are running short of time, I will move to the next kind of presenter. And I will then invite Professor MJ for his closing remarks.
Okay, thank you, Ravi.
Yes.
I hope everybody can hear me. Thank you. I will be very short in the interest of time. Let me thank all the facilitators, particularly the facilitator here. And then also let me thank the WAWE staff and the director, Judy, for helping us set up this and then for facilitating it, making sure that it happens like it has happened. Let me also thank the presenters for agreeing to leave their jobs and so forth and come to share their insight with us. I've noticed one interesting thing about them. They're all executive directors in the organizations. That is very good. And we really want to partner with people like yourselves as well as organizations. And then I will also take this opportunity to invite you and other people in your networks to also join with GEEP Africa so that we can actually strengthen environmental education in the country and beyond the borders. The topic itself is quite interesting. It's current, it's more recent. It's one of those global discourses that are dominating the discussions on environment. And then I'm happy that you were able to address it. In particular, I'm really thrilled by what you are doing there. That is trying to invest in the future. Once you are working with children, you are working with youth, that is quite great. You are really futuristic in your thinking as well as in action. That is great. I wish we could have more of these networks around the globe and in Africa in particular. I would also thank you for being focused and for actually bringing an element of education into the discussion. That is critical for us. You have mentioned so much concerning the triple planetary crisis. You have mentioned what you are doing. You have mentioned the challenges, particularly the last presenter, the challenges that you are facing. Those challenges, please turn them into opportunities so that you work harder and succeed in your work or the work that you do. You also actually excited or incited a lot of us when it comes to indigenous knowledge and then the role that you are playing in the communities where you are. This is commendable. I really commend you for being able to connect education with what you are doing. That is critical. I think you know what it's said about education as the key or the pillar
of the SDGs. Please carry on, play that particular role. I would also invite the listeners around to also register with Prof. Ravi, who is the moderator here. If you want to stay hooked with GEEP Africa, we are looking for people like yourselves. When you respond to him or when you contact him, he will send you a questionnaire. Please respond to that questionnaire so that we can keep you in the network or in the group, and then we can be actually share all these things. The other thing is I would also want to invite you to join us again in October, November. We'll be organizing another webinar, and then I would be happy to see more people volunteering or coming forth to be presenters like the three wonderful people who have actually done the presentation in this webinar. In this way, we can actually collaboratively strengthen environmental education across the continent as well as globally. With that, Ravi, I would say congratulations to everybody. Thanks very much for joining us. Please, even the next time when we call, respond as you have responded. Invite more people. If one of you can bring one or two more, that will be great. Thank you very much, Ravi. Back to you.
Okay, thank you, Professor MJ. So I seize this opportunity now to thank all the panel speakers, Prof. MJ again, Judy, Nina, Andrew, Gary, and most importantly, all our participants. Thank you very much for participating in this webinar. And I think we learned a lot on the triple planet Earth crisis and how environmental education or education for sustainable development can be a vehicle to address the issues. Thank you again. So now I'm going to close the session. So thank you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ravi. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.